Christmas dinner has a way of magnifying whatever is already broken in a family. If there are cracks, the holiday lights only shine brighter on them. If there are old wounds, the scent of ham and cinnamon somehow drags them back to the surface. That night, sitting at the same mahogany dining table I had known since childhood, I realized my family had been waiting for this moment for the final cut, the final dismissal. The announcement came right after my mother finished carving the ham. I had been carefully slicing my portion into precise pieces, a nervous habit I'd developed at family gatherings, a way of controlling something when I could control nothing else. My brother Carlos set down his wine glass with the solemnity of a judge delivering a verdict. He cleared his throat as if preparing to make a toast, but the words that followed weren't celebratory. They were an execution. "Sophia, we need to talk about your living situation." I looked up, fork frozen midair. The words landed like a blow to the chest. My living situation. That's what he called it. Not my home. Not the place where I had grown up, where I had wept through heartbreaks, where I had patched walls and polished banisters with my own hands. Just a situation, temporary, disposable, inconvenient. He leaned forward, rehearsed confidence dripping from his tone. "This house belongs to the family now. Mom and Dad are getting older. They need the space for when they retire. You've been here rent-free for 2 years, and honestly, it's time you found your own place." My mother nodded, lips pressed together in that tight line she wore when she wanted to seem gentle, but her eyes betrayed the satisfaction beneath. "We think it would be good for you, honey. You need to learn independence." My father, never one to miss his part in the chorus, added, "Carlos has been looking at the real estate market. This house has appreciated significantly. We could use the space more efficiently." And with Dad's knee problems, Carlos chimed in eagerly, "They should really live on one level. It makes sense for everyone. Everyone except me." I set my fork down slowly, breathing through the tremor in my hands. "So you want me to move out so you can move in?" "It's not about wanting," my mother replied, her voice coated in that syrupy reasonableness she used to disguise cruelty. "It's about what's practical. You're 31, Sophia. Most people your age have their own homes. And Carlos," my father said, puffing up with pride, "is 34. He has a real career, a wife. He's in a better position to maintain this place." There it was, the subtext that had haunted me for years. Carlos was the shining sun, the financial advisor with the stable income, the man who carried the family's approval like a crown. And me, I was the daughter who worked in computers, who never married, who couldn't keep a boyfriend long enough to give them grandchildren. In their eyes, I was the family disappointment. What they didn't know, what they had chosen not to know, was that for the last 3 years, I had quietly been paying all the property taxes on this house. What they didn't know was that when Dad's heart attack nearly bankrupted them, I had covered the medical bills. What they didn't know was that the generous narrative they told themselves that they were letting me live here rent-free was a lie. The truth was harsher, sharper. I had been letting them live in my house. Carlos sipped his wine, smugness curling at the corners of his mouth. "We were thinking New Year's would be reasonable. That gives you a week to find something." A week, during the holidays, in a market where rentals were scarce and overpriced. The timeline wasn't chosen out of fairness. It was chosen to break me, to make me scramble, to force me into begging. They wanted me on my knees, grateful for any crumbs they offered. Instead, I pulled out my phone. Silence spread across the table like spilled wine. In our family, answering a call during dinner was considered the height of rudeness. But at that moment, their rules no longer bound me. I dialed the number I had memorized, the one I'd been carrying like a weapon waiting for its moment. "Martinez Security Services," came the crisp voice on the other end. "David," I said, steady as stone. "This is Sophia Martinez. I need a team at the Oakwood Drive property immediately. Situation trespassing. Escort the Martinez family from the premises within the hour." The room froze. My mother's hand stopped midair. My father blinked rapidly as though his brain had short-circuited. Carlos laughed, high-pitched and nervous. "Your property. Sophia, this house has been in the family for over 20 years. Just because you've been crashing here doesn't make it yours." "Actually, it does," I said. From my purse, I pulled out a folder, one I had carried for weeks, unsure when or how I would finally wield it. I slid it across the table and opened it to reveal the property deed. My name in ink clear and undeniable. This house was sold to me 3 years ago when you defaulted on the mortgage. My father's face went pale. That's impossible. We never defaulted. You stopped making payments in March of 2021. I said, my voice steady, even as rage churned beneath. By December, you were 6 months behind and facing foreclosure. I bought the house from the bank for $847,000. I saved it. I saved you. Carlos's face twisted, eyes scanning the document in frantic disbelief. This, this has to be fake. You don't have that kind of money. You work in IT or something. I work in cybersecurity consulting, I corrected. My company has contracts with Fortune 500 firms and government agencies. Last year's revenue was $42 million. The number hung in the air like smoke from a candle just extinguished. My father whispered it back to himself as if saying it aloud could make it vanish. 42 million, Carlos sputtered. If you had that kind of money, why would you live here? Why drive that old Honda? Why act like... Why would I live modestly? Why would I let you believe I was struggling? I leaned forward, my voice low and sharp, because I wanted to see if you valued me as a person or only as someone you thought you could control. The truth sliced through the room, leaving nothing but silence. The weight of my words seemed to settle over the table like a heavy snowfall, muting every sound, every breath. My mother's knife hovered above the ham, her hand trembling, eyes wide, as if I had just spoken in a foreign language. My father blinked, his lips parting and closing without sound, like he was trying to assemble words from fragments of disbelief. Carlos, however, recovered quicker than I expected. He leaned back in his chair, forced laughter spilling out like broken glass. This is absurd. Sophia, stop this act. You're just trying to scare us. Everyone here knows you could never have bought this house. You barely keep yourself together, and now you want us to believe you're some secret millionaire. I pushed the folder closer to him, the deed visible under the chandelier's golden light. That's not an act. That's legal fact. You can flip through the documents if you'd like. Purchase agreements, bank records, the LLC paperwork. It's all there. His hand trembled as he flipped the first few pages. But pride forced him to scoff. These could be fakes. Anyone can print a deed. This isn't real. Then explain, I said quietly, why you've been living here for 3 years as my guests. No lease, no rent, no rights. Guests. In my home. My father finally found his voice, but it was stripped of authority, bare and fragile. Sophia, sweetheart, this can't be true. We've been making payments. We caught up with the bank. You caught up, I said evenly, because I bought the house out of foreclosure. The bank no longer held your debt. I did. You've been living here because I allowed you to. I didn't want you on the street, so I carried you quietly without telling you. I paid the bills, I paid the taxes, and I let you think you'd manage to save yourselves. The truth hung between us, too sharp to touch. Carlos slammed the folder shut, his face red. Even if, let's just say, even if this were true, you can't just throw us out. This is our family home. Family home. I repeated, tasting the bitterness of the words. 30 minutes ago, you told me to pack my bags, that I was overstaying, that my time was up. What made it a family home then? When you wanted me gone so you could move in. No, Carlos. It was only a family home when it suited you. Now it's mine. And the only reason you're here at all is because I chose to keep you here. The doorbell rang. The sharp chime cut through the silence like a judge's gavel. That I said standing will be security. My mother's face crumpled. Sophia, what are you doing? What you plan to do to me, I replied, my tone quiet but unyielding. Removing people who don't belong. I opened the door to find 3 men in black uniforms standing on the porch, the insignia of Martinez Security stitched on their sleeves. David, their leader, inclined his head respectfully. Good evening, Ms. Martinez. You have a trespassing situation. 3 individuals in the dining room. Shall we remove them immediately or allow them time to gather belongings? My heart pounded not from fear, but from the collision of years of rage and grief pressing against the moment of choice. For a flash, I wanted to mirror their cruelty, to tell security to clear them out, now bags or no bags, to let them taste the panic they had tried to feed me. But something steadier in me prevailed. Give them until tomorrow evening, I said. They can take personal belongings, but furniture and household items stay with the house. Understood, David said, his voice calm, professional. I followed him back to the dining room where the security team's presence shifted the air instantly. Carlos leapt up, chest puffed out, but Jessica, his wife, tugged him back down, her face pale. My father gripped the table like it was the last anchor keeping him from drowning. David addressed them politely but firmly. Mr. and Mrs. Martinez. Mr. Carlos Martinez. You are currently trespassing on private property owned by Martinez Holdings, LLC. Ms. Sofia Martinez is the legal representative and has requested your removal. You have until 6 p.m. tomorrow to vacate the premises. After that, remaining items will be considered abandoned. This is insane, my father barked, though his voice cracked. This is our home. David shook his head. According to property records, it is not. This house has belonged to Martinez Holdings for 3 years. Ms. Martinez is the legal owner. My mother's eyes filled with tears. She turned to me, desperation cracking her voice. Sophia, honey, please. It's Christmas. We're family. Surely we can talk this through. I looked at her. Really looked at her. 30 minutes ago, she had nodded when Carlos said I needed to leave, her face serene as though she was delivering wisdom instead of betrayal. 30 minutes ago, she had been willing to see me out in the cold during the holidays because Carlos had a wife and a career, and I, in her eyes, had neither. Now she wanted mercy because the balance of power had shifted. Mom, I said softly, 30 minutes ago, you were fine with me leaving in a week. You thought that was practical. What's changed? She swallowed hard. We didn't know. You didn't know, I said, voice rising, because you never asked. You assumed. You all assumed. You assumed I was a failure, a burden, a leftover. You never asked what I did, what I built, what I sacrificed. And when I tried to tell you, you laughed. You patted me on the head like a child with delusions. You preferred the story where I was weak. And now, faced with the truth, you're only sorry because it cost you comfort. Silence fell again, deeper, now heavier. My words felt like knives, but I didn't regret them. Carlos finally spoke, his pride clinging to him like armor full of cracks. Fine. Let's say you do own this house. Let's say you did build some company. That doesn't give you the right to destroy this family. I stared at him, the brother who had just announced my exile minutes earlier. I'm not destroying anything, Carlos. I'm setting boundaries. You wanted me out of this house. I'm giving you your wish. The only difference is that you're the ones leaving. His mouth opened and closed, searching for an answer, but none came. I stood tall, my hands steady now, my voice no longer trembling. For the first time in years, I wasn't the family's embarrassment or their pity project. I was the truth they had refused to see standing right in front of them. The dining room felt like a courtroom after the verdict had been read. No one moved at first. The guards remained by the doorway, quiet but immovable, their presence a reminder that this was no longer a debate. It was enforcement. My brother sat stiffly in his chair, his pride collapsing in on itself like a house stripped of its beams. My father's hands shook against the polished wood of the table, his once commanding presence reduced to a man stunned into silence. And my mother looked at me as though I were both her daughter and a stranger she had never known. Finally, Jessica whispered something into Carlos's ear. He shot her a glare, but then reluctantly, he pushed back his chair. Fine. We'll pack. His voice was thin, stretched like old rope about to snap. He didn't look at me as he spoke. He couldn't. The guard stepped aside to let him pass. My parents stayed seated for another long moment, as though frozen to the mahogany chairs that had been witness to so many Christmas dinners, birthdays, and fights over nothing. Then my mother's chair scraped back slowly. She stood, her eyes glossy. My father followed, moving heavily every step like he carried the weight of decades on his back. I watched them retreat to their rooms, the creak of the stairs echoing through the house. Part of me wanted to crumble in that moment, to chase after them, to take it all back. But another part, stronger, clearer, held me still. They had planned to discard me tonight. They had carved up my life between bites of ham, treating me as a problem to solve. Why should I carry guilt for finally revealing the truth? I stood in the quiet aftermath, my pulse still racing. The folder of documents sat on the table, its edges illuminated by the glow of the chandelier. For years, I had carried that folder with me like a weight, waiting for the right moment to show them. I hadn't planned to wield it tonight, not like this. But maybe deep down, I had always known the confrontation would come at Christmas. There was something poetic about exposing betrayal under the same roof that had once held our happiest memories. I went upstairs to my room in my house. I closed the door and leaned against it, my body trembling as though my bones had been rattled loose. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt hollow. I began packing, not because I was leaving, but because I needed to touch everything I owned to separate the life I had carried in silence from the life I was stepping into now. Drawers opened to reveal sweaters my mother had given me years ago, their sleeves frayed, still carrying the faint scent of the lavender detergent she always used. Old photographs slipped out from the backs of books, Carlos and me as children grinning with missing teeth. Mom and Dad on their anniversaries smiling as if their love was a fortress that could never crumble. I sat on the floor, photographs spread around me, and grief rose up like a tide. For years, I had been protecting them. When Dad's heart attack sent medical bills spiraling, I had written checks through a shell company so he wouldn't feel emasculated by my help. When Mom's car failed inspection, I had my mechanic repair it and bill it to a fictional warranty program. When Carlos bragged about his financial acumen while quietly struggling, I had funneled contracts toward him through business acquaintances to keep him afloat. And yet they had still looked at me with pity. They had still seen me as the weak one. Why had I let them? I asked myself that question again and again, my tears falling onto the photographs. Why had I allowed their story about me to become my silence? I could have corrected them at any time. I could have said, "No, I'm not failing, I'm thriving, I'm carrying you." But every time I tried to bring up my work, they brushed me aside. "That sounds nice, dear. Don't bore us with computer talk. Carlos is the one we need to discuss." So I had retreated. I had folded myself into invisibility. And in doing so, I had built the perfect cage for my own accomplishments. The sound of suitcases dragging across hardwood startled me back to the present. I peeked out the window and saw Carlos and Jessica loading bags into their BMW. His movements were sharp, angry. He slammed the trunk closed so hard the car shuddered. Jessica touched his arm, but he shook her off, his pride too wounded to accept comfort. Mom and Dad were slower moving with the heavy weariness of people who had aged a decade in one evening. They carried boxes to the Mercedes, their faces drawn and pale under the porch light. I watched them pause by the car, leaning against each other for support. They looked small, fragile, vulnerable in a way I had never seen them before. And my heart broke all over again, because even after everything, even after their betrayal, their cruelty, their dismissal, I still loved them. I didn't know how not to. By morning, they were gone. The house felt eerily different. Not empty exactly, just lighter, like a weight had been lifted off its foundations. For the first time in years, the walls seemed to breathe freely. I walked slowly through each room, my footsteps echoing. Every corner held memories. Birthday candles, slammed doors, whispered arguments late at night. But the air carried a new clarity. These rooms weren't shared anymore. They were mine. I paused in the living room, staring at the tree glittering in the corner, the ornaments carefully hung by hands that had hours earlier condemned me. The gifts under the branches sat untouched, their shiny paper reflecting the light in mocking cheer. It struck me that the best gift I had given myself wasn't wrapped in paper at all, it was the truth. That evening my phone rang. The caller ID flashed Mom. I stared at it for a long time before answering. Her voice was subdued, stripped of its usual authority. "Sophia, we're at Carlos's apartment for now, but we need to talk." "I'm listening," I said, my voice even. "I've been thinking about what you said. About us never asking. About us not knowing your life, and I think you're right." Her words wavered like a bridge threatening to collapse. "We were wrong." It wasn't a full apology, but it was closer than I had ever heard from her. She drew in a shaky breath. "Your father and we are proud of you. We just didn't realize how much you had accomplished. Why didn't you tell us? Because every time I tried, I said you shut me down. You didn't want to hear about my world. You only wanted me to fit into yours." There was silence on the line, heavy and honest. "We were so focused on what we thought success should look like," she whispered, "that we couldn't see what your success actually looked like. For the first time in years, her words didn't feel like dismissal. They felt like recognition, late, imperfect, but real. For a long moment, I sat with the phone pressed to my ear, listening to my mother's breathing on the other end. I could almost see her sitting at Carlos's apartment, wringing her hands the way she always did when she was caught between pride and shame. I wanted to believe her words, wanted to believe that she finally saw me. But a part of me remained wary. Recognition offered under duress wasn't the same as genuine respect. "You're right," I told her quietly. "You didn't see. You didn't want to see. You let Carlos's version of me become the family's truth. And you fed it every time you smiled at his jokes, every time you nodded along when he dismissed me." There was a pause, then a trembling sigh. "We were trying to protect you." I almost laughed, the sound sharp in my chest. Protect me from what? From knowing I was capable. From being proud of what I'd built. No, Mom. You weren't protecting me. You were protecting your own picture of what success should look like. A husband. A house. A career you understood. Anything else you couldn't process it, so you called it failure. On the line she sniffled. We were wrong. About a lot of things. Her voice cracked on the last words, and for the first time I believed she meant it. Still, the ache in me was too deep to be healed by one conversation. "What happens now?" she asked softly. That question lingered like smoke. What did happen now? I had spent years carrying the family from the shadows, financing their stability, while living under the weight of their pity. I had built a life they refused to see, and in one night, the curtain had been pulled back. "Now," I said slowly, "we figure out if we can have a real relationship, one based on who we actually are, not who we pretend to be. But you need to understand the house is mine. It has been mine for 3 years. If you want to live here again, we'll have to talk about terms, real conversations, expectations, boundaries." Her silence stretched then. "Finally, we'd like that. To talk. To try again." "Then we'll talk," I said. "But not tonight. Tonight I need space." When I hung up, my chest felt hollow, like someone had scooped out the grief but left the echo behind. I walked through the empty halls of the house, each creak of the floorboards reminding me that silence could be both comforting and crushing. Over the next few weeks, those conversations did happen. Long, difficult ones. My parents and I sat across from each other at the kitchen table, stripped of pretense, picking apart years of assumptions. My father admitted how much his pride had blinded him, how the idea of his daughter surpassing him financially had been too painful to face. My mother confessed she had measured me against a checklist I never agreed to follow. And Carlos was the hardest. His pride had been shattered that night, and he struggled to rebuild it. For years, he had lived as the successful son, the one with the career, the wife, the stability. Learning that I had been subsidizing the family lifestyle while he lectured me about responsibility was a wound his ego couldn't heal overnight. He avoided me at first, refusing to answer my calls. When we finally spoke, his words were edged with bitterness. "You humiliated me," he said. I stared at him across a cafe table, the noise of clinking cups around us. "You humiliated yourself when you decided I was disposable. All I did was tell the truth. You didn't have to do it like that, in front of everyone, at Christmas. And you didn't have to tell me to pack my bags in front of everyone. But you did." He glared at me, then looked away, his jaw tight. I could see the boy he had once been, the brother who built forts with me in the backyard, who protected me from bullies at school. Somewhere along the way, that brother had been replaced by a man who measured worth in careers and appearances. "I don't know how to see you now," he admitted finally. "Then start by seeing me as your equal," I said. "Not as the embarrassment you invented, not as the sister who needed your pity, just as me." It took months. Therapy sessions with a specialist in family wealth conflicts helped. My parents sat through painful reflections. Carlos sat through even more, his defensiveness, cracking piece by piece until he could look me in the eye without flinching. 6 months later, we reached something that felt like balance. My parents moved back into the house, not as owners, but as tenants paying market rent. It was their idea. My father said he needed to feel like he was contributing, not just accepting charity. For once, I didn't argue. I respected it. Carlos and Jessica bought their own place. It was smaller than the one they had wanted, but it was theirs, affordable on Carlos's salary. Slowly, cautiously, he began to refer clients to my cybersecurity firm, and I, in turn, used his financial planning services for my business accounts. A professional relationship grew first, and then gradually, a personal one followed. It wasn't easy. Family never is. There were still moments of tension, moments when old wounds bled through. But there was also honesty now where before there had been silence. And honesty, even painful honesty, is better than the suffocating weight of lies. The house itself felt different too. Every Christmas after that night when we gathered around the same mahogany table, the memory of the year. Everything changed hung in the air. We told the story with laughter. Eventually, the Christmas when security guards escorted the family out of their own home. It became less a wound and more a turning point the night we stopped pretending and started facing who we really were. Love, I realized, cannot exist without respect. And for years, our love had been conditional, dependent on roles and illusions. But once the illusions fell, once the respect was demanded, the love that remained was raw, but it was real. The first Christmas after everything changed arrived quietly, as if the house itself was holding its breath. Snow fell gently outside, blanketing the lawn, in white muting the world. Inside, the mahogany table was polished to a gleam, the tree glowed with golden lights, and for the first time in years, there was no heaviness pressing down on me. My parents arrived early, carrying dishes instead of demands. They placed gifts under the tree, but their eyes flickered with something new, humility. Carlos and Jessica came later, their arms full of boxes, their smiles tentative. There was an unspoken acknowledgement in the air. We all knew what had happened last Christmas, and none of us would ever forget it. But now, instead of pretending it never happened, we carried it openly like a scar we had learned to live with. We sat around the same table, but it no longer felt like theirs. It felt like mine because it was. And yet, for the first time, that didn't make me feel distant from them. It made me feel secure, able to welcome them not as oppressors of my silence, but as people learning, fumbling, trying. Mom raised her glass and smiled at me. To Sophia, she said softly, for teaching us that success doesn't always look the way we expect, and for reminding us that family means nothing if it isn't built on respect. Her words sank into me like warm light. For years, I had longed to hear something like that. And though it came late, though it was imperfect, it was real. We toasted and the clink of glasses sounded like a small miracle. Later that evening, as we exchanged gifts, I realized that the best gift wasn't under the tree. It was the freedom I felt inside myself, the freedom to no longer be invisible, the freedom to no longer swallow my truth, the freedom to exist in this family not as their disappointment, but as myself whole, complex, undeniable. Still, I would be lying if I said it didn't hurt sometimes. There were moments when my brother's laughter carried a bitter edge, when my mother's gaze lingered on me with guilt instead of pride, when my father's silence stretched longer than comfort allowed. Healing doesn't come in one dramatic revelation. It comes in the quiet work of choosing again and again to show up with honesty. But there was progress, and progress, however imperfect, was enough. In the months that followed, I found myself thinking often about that night, about the moment I had called security on my own family, about the folder of documents laid bare under the chandelier. I thought about the little girl I had been sitting at that same table, believing family was unconditional. And I thought about the woman I had become, realizing that love without respect is not love at all. I carried those reflections into my work too. I led my team with more openness, no longer hiding behind modesty, so people wouldn't feel small beside me. I shared my story with women in business circles who confessed that they too had made themselves small for family, for friends, for partners. And each time I told them the same truth: silence will never earn you respect. Only truth will. Even now, years later, when I walk through this house, I can still feel echoes of that Christmas. I can see my brother's stunned face when I laid down the deed. I can hear my mother's gasp when security arrived. I can feel the cold steel of my own resolve as I refused to back down. And though it was painful, though it nearly broke me, I wouldn't undo it. Because it was the night everything shifted. It was the night I stopped being the family's embarrassment and became the woman I had always been seen, undeniable, free. So if you're listening to this now, if you've ever felt small in your own family, If you've ever swallowed your truth to keep the peace, I want you to hear me. You don't owe anyone the version of yourself that makes them comfortable. You owe the world your real self, the self you fought to build, the self that deserves to stand in the light. Family should be a place where you are seen and loved for who you are, not who they wish you to be. And if they cannot see you, then you must see yourself. That is where freedom begins. As I sit here now, I know one thing for certain. The best gifts in life aren't the ones wrapped in shiny paper or tied with bows. The best gifts are the truths you finally decide to share, even when your voice shakes, even when it costs you everything. Because those truths free you. And once you're free, no one can put you back in the box they built for you. If this story touched something inside you, if you've ever wrestled with silence, betrayal, or the longing to be seen, please like, share, and subscribe. Leave a comment below and tell me about your own story, your own moment of truth. Because none of us should have to walk through that silence alone.